Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and today I'm doing a playthrough and review of In the Ashes. This is a book, kind of choose your own adventure-ish book, but with this like little grid/action system. Everything in the game is resolved by writing with a pencil, and you can play through the book twice, is my understanding. So you don't have to erase anything, although I guess if you really wanted to go through and erase every mark you've made, you could. But yeah, you'll be like writing and drawing on stuff. But then if you follow some rules that are at the end of the book, you can play through different choices because there's a lot of branching things here, or play through different combat encounters, and that way you never have to erase anything. So it's got two plays in it instead of one, like something like Exit or another game that sort of uses itself up. And it's claimed that I got a review copy of this one. And if you like the content on the One Stop Co-op Shop, consider supporting us through Patreon. You get early access to our videos and exclusive videos every month you can't see anywhere else. You can also listen to our podcast for reviews and design discussions, or join the conversation and say hi on our Discord. But yes, I'm going to play through a bit of the game on camera. This is, the kind of game that I don't want to play through too much because I'm literally taking away your ability to play it and experience it for yourself. So I'll play through the first maybe 3 encounters and read some story stuff as well. But then after that, I'm going to play off camera and come back with a review after I've gotten deeper into the game. So let's go. We've got this disturbing picture of a girl on fire first with somewhat questionable art on some of it, but some of it looks really nice. And let's get to a little bit of narrative reading before we get to the gameplay. This story, like so many great stories, begins in the same place that it ends, on the edge of an abyss. I do not often think about the past, and when I do, I usually keep clear of this part. I do not know where I was born, but I do know I spent my earliest years of life on the island of Obor. This patch of land sticking out in the sea lies far to the north of the continent. For centuries it has made a living from fishing, trade, and the mining that was carried out in the inland mountains. The geography of the island is rounded out with a foul-smelling swamp and sharply cut fjords framed by high cliffs. There are only a couple of towns, and they have all seen better times. I remember that I, like the other children orphaned by the sea, lived on the streets. During the harsh winters, they would let some of us spend the night in the stables, a basement, or even an attic dormer. Sometimes some of our number would simply disappear from sight, never to be seen again, and we were wise enough not to ask questions about what happened to them. My earliest concrete memory was one specific afternoon when I was 5 or 6 years old. The thaw in the streets announced the end of a particularly long winter, and as I reached the market square, I encountered the warmth of flames. The villagers had seized a young girl who lived in one of the farms outside town. She lived with her father near the green swamp, and both had been accused of witchcraft. They had bound her to a stake in the midst of the fire. She stood with a blank stare on her face and did not make a sound as the flames enveloped her. The smell of her burning hair and skin invaded my nostrils. I could barely force myself to get close enough to eavesdrop on a couple of macabre jeerers who were looking on. My intention was to find out something about what was going on before my horror forced me to run away. All right, so now they're going to teach us the rules, but I'll summarize it for you. So each of the little scenes will have a map like this, and you're going to be resolving 2 action cards each round, and the cards you pick cannot be in the same row or the same column as the other card you pick. So here with only 4 options, I would have to pick this diagonal grouping or this diagonal grouping, although later on you'll have more options than that. You'll write the round that you pick the cards in. In this case, there are only 2 rounds. So I could move 3 and then listen the first round, or listen and move 2. And you can resolve them in whatever order you want, although you cross them out as you go. So I could move and then listen, or listen and then move. And then usually the enemies or whatever would get to take their turn, potentially move and attack us, but that's not the case in this one. We're just trying to eavesdrop. All right, so let's see what the goal says. Move around the scene and listen to 2 different citizens before the 2 rounds come to an end. You cannot listen to the same person twice. Depending on where you listen or whom you listen to in round 1 and in round 2, check the behavior panel and mark the symbol on the indicated page. I'll show you how that works in a second. When you are done, read the outcome at the bottom of the page. All right, so we've got move 3 and then listen adjacent, and then move 2, listen at a distance of up to 3. So move 3 and then listen adjacent could get us to A or C. And move 2 and listen at distance 3, 1, 2, could get us to B. I'm really curious about D because there seems to be no other way to get to him. So what if I don't know, listen to this troubadour and the D person. So what I do is I will say I'm doing move 3 and listen on round 1. And for movement, I'm just supposed to mark where I end up and the round number I got there. So moving 3, 1, 2, 3. So I just say X and 1 to show that I'm there in round 1. And then I'm going to listen to A. So it says, who did I listen to? So I listened to A. So I mark a symbol on page 11. This is a pretty interesting system. I've never seen this before in this kind of game. You flip to the page and you mark that you did something, and then when I get to page 11, I'll read like something special because of that. All right, and then they didn't have much to do, so we go to round 2, and I'm going to listen at a distance of up to 3 spaces away and move up to 2. So let's go ahead and I guess, well, here, I don't even need to be far away. I'll just go here and listen to D. So I'm marking the icon on page 35. Oh, and there's a couple of icons on page 35, but I'm doing the whatever that icon is. There we go. Okay, and branching outcomes, if I were able to, was able to listen to 2 citizens, oh gosh, you'd have to work really hard not to be able to listen to 2 citizens here. I go to page 7. I inconspicuously moved closer to some of the citizens. To my right, the owner had stepped out of the local tavern so he would not miss the show. I also spotted the chronicler, who was unable to write anything down without mumbling the words he wrote out loud as he scribbled. A bit further away, a merchant looked on without saying a word. He was a well-known trader who came from the continent every couple of months to sell spices and exotic fabrics. The doomed young girl had been captured along with her father in the farm where they both lived. They were both known for being passionate about plants and made ointments with what they found growing wild in the swamp and beyond. This fact, together with the many children who had gone missing in the last few weeks of winter, had provided enough proof for the arrest of the family for witchcraft. Standing near the burning fire was the sheriff, known as Thorval Wind-Tamer. He had earned the nickname as a sailor in his youth. The glow of the fire emphasized his extremely pale skin. His tough demeanor and expensive clothes set him apart as the most important representative of the law in that region. He was equally admired and feared for his severity when he managed his fleet of ships. At that moment, he was orating in front of the crowd, enjoying his moment of glory, accusing the girl of witchcraft, of dancing naked with dark shadows on the night of the full moon, and gathering roots used to stun and stupefy the orphans that lived on the streets. He did not seem at all affected by being so near to the fire. His only worry was that the girl's father, Solomon Derbsman, had escaped during the arrest. Solomon had thrown a powder into the eyes of the guards and then fled into the thick undergrowth of the swamp. Living on the streets had taught me to take advantage of opportunities like this to acquire objects of value that I would be able to exchange for shoes for use in the next winter. Before leaving, I decided to snatch up something from the self-absorbed villagers. The merchant was distracted from watching over the enormous dried 4-leaf clover on his stand's counter, while the back pocket of the tavern keeper flaunted a ring set with a violet stone, held by a chain made red with rust. All right, so I can choose what to steal. Grab the merchant or the tavern keeper. Do I want a lucky 4-leaf clover or a ring with a stone? I'm going to go for the 4-leaf clover because that feels like cursed. Or, well, it's also on a chain, so theoretically it's harder to rob, right? So 37, and I'm marking the 4-leaf clover. I ran away right after my theft, fleeing as the flames consumed Solmon's daughter. Okay, so that's it for the prologue. Pretty quick. And we go to Act 1, He Who Spoke with the Tides. And here's the partially revealed map. I guess this is as far as we'll get in Act 1, the island of Obor. And yeah, let's jump in, do at least a couple more, do some fights, do some more mic reading time. Nearly 20 years have passed since they burned the young girl for supposedly being a witch. Such gruesome events and accusations of witchcraft were not common events on the island. The shame and the discretion of the inhabitants allowed the event to slowly fade from the memory of those living on the coast of Obor. Since that day, not a soul spoke of the incident. My name is Vestar. My part in this extraordinary story began at the edge of a precipice, one of the many that make up the sheer cliffs that define the southern edge of the island. This particular one stood just outside the fishing town of Innisfell, and it was not the first time I had climbed up to the edge. As a child, I used to love hiding among the strange rock formations that arose around the summit. The old people would sit around and argue about whether they were a whimsy of Mother Nature or if they had been constructed in some forgotten age with some dark intention. Regardless, none but the mad would ever venture up to that gloomy part of the island. Yet it was exactly the spot I found myself. After what felt like a lifetime at sea working on a fishing vessel, we had docked for a few days to sell our goods before we once again embarked for a month outside of the sight of land. On that particular afternoon, no different from so many others, the sun had just dropped below the horizon when something that would change all our lives occurred. You know too little about me as yet to understand my motivations at the time, but the truth is that I was about to leap into the void and put an end to the pain that had tormented my body for years. Since I was very little, the damp and cold of that cursed island had penetrated my bones, causing intense suffering both day and night. As the sun set, the wind stopped and a strange calm came over the place, interrupted only by the noise of the waves crashing hundreds of feet below. Despite the piercing pain in my back, the beautiful setting made me feel peace for the first time in a very, very long time. And then it happened. The sky turned red. What started as a low buzz grew into a thundering boom in my ears, deafening me. Instinct made me crouch down as a ball of fire and ash shot through the sky, headed towards the inland part of the island. 1 second later, the earth shook as the fireball crashed into the mountains. I lost my balance. The air became still and odd. Then suddenly an electric shock struck me in the chest, knocked me to the ground. I rolled back toward the strange rock formations away from the cliff. Just as quickly as the bolt itself, my earlier intentions of self-harm left me. My curiosity overcame my weariness. Oh, and we marked this one, so let's see. I remembered when the orphans would gather around the chronicler in the street and he would tell us some scary stories about prophecies, bad omens, and misfortune that accompanied the falling of objects from the sky. If I had seen it, then the rest of the superstitious population of Innisfell would have seen it too. I got up and was about to run straight down to the port, which lay about a half-mile away. But as I got to my feet and turned toward the rocks, a nauseating smell stopped me in my tracks. A creature stood in my path, immobile before me. I had forgotten that these repugnant mushrooms hid below the ground during the day, but opened at night to hunt a bird or, with a little more luck, a fox or a hare. This particular one was extremely large and was intent on hunting me for its supper. Okay, so this is going to be our first actual battle. I took out the rusty fish knife I used to clean fish in the market and approached the monster. I cannot waste any time with this creature since I had to get to the port as soon as I could. So this is an example of where things will branch a little bit. So there's like a little tutorial battle. And if I was playing the campaign again, I would just skip it entirely and go to page 14. Although usually my understanding is that they'll like send you to a different fight so that you're like still getting to play the game instead of just skipping it. Okay, but here we go. The mushroom between the rocks. Okay, defeat the mushroom before 2 rounds come to an end. This is still going to be pretty straightforward. So I've got the mushroom, I've got me. This one does not move, although enemies do sometimes move. If it did, I would write its letter as it moved, the same as mine. Okay, so I've got to do at least 5 damage to defeat the mushroom. And on round 1, he's going to attack for a 2 damage at a distance of 3. And then on round 2, he's going to attack for 3 damage at a distance of 3. I've got 6 life, so there's no way for me to defeat it here, and you do fully heal. You don't have to like ever go back and look at things from a previous page. And I've got 4 actions still, so I'm still doing the exact same thing as last time where I'm using diagonals. I will have all of these for like the first next fight that is more of a real one. So what's his range? Range 3. So I could attack at a distance of 3. And then attack, okay, yes, it is obvious what I'm going to do. So for round 1, I'm going to move 3 and then attack 2 damage at a distance of up to 3. So let's try to get as close as we can. So here I am, and I'm attacking for 2 at a distance of 3. Okay, and then he attacks me for 2, and I am in range. So there we go. And then, yeah, this is very challenging. Things will clearly become more interesting. So now I can move up to 2 and then attack 3 if I'm adjacent. So here we go. I'll go there for round 2. And finish this bad boy off. And I did achieve the goal, so I will. Oh, I would have gone to page 14 either way, but I would have marked something if I had not actually defeated the guy. Darkness had already fallen when, breathing hard, I reached the port. The harbor was made up of a series of natural breakwaters. Their irregular path through the cove provided piers and docks, and a group of wooden buildings stood on the most prominent stone outcroppings arising from the water. The villagers had gathered into nervous clusters with their eyes raised to the sky and their fingers tracing the path of the object as they animatedly discussed what had happened. I got up on the deck of my ship and spoke with the rest of the crew. They were all excited by the event and everyone was eager to recount their own experience. Of course, I did not offer up that I had gone up to the cliffs or my intention to end things. I did find out that at that same moment, all the most influential bigwigs of Innisfell were on their way to the port's tavern to meet about the incident. There was even a chance they would set up an expedition to the impact site to set foot in the ashes of the crater itself. There was talk of strange lights on the horizon and a metallic smell in the air. It was then that Khan appeared behind me. All of my crewmates went silent. The ship's master was a huge man, well over 6.5 feet tall, who had no talent for sailing or fishing. His sole accomplishment over the last decade had been working as the personal bodyguard of the sheriff, Thorval Windtamer. His lack of hair anywhere on his body was compensated by his abundant tattoos. Khan kicked me to the ground and yelled that I had not worked at all the whole day. He loved that my chronic bone pain intensified with stress and tension. He ordered me to immediately see to a most unpleasant task. At the bow, there was a pair of nether rats. They had a bad attitude and their skin was a sickly color. One of them was as big as a barrel of wine, and the other was particularly slippery. I was to take my choice of which to handle. He then spit at my feet and took his leave. Seemed my yearnings for exploration and adventure would have to wait. All right, so here we go, our first really branching choice. If I take care of the overgrown rat, turn to page 18. If I take care of the slippery rat, turn to page 16. Let's go for the overgrown rat. So we're going to page 18. All right, an overgrown rat. Defeat the slippery rat, fill in all of its hearts before 3 rounds come to an end. So I guess I got to kill the one rat to let the other rat eat enough? I don't know. So when the enemy moves, it will do so using the shortest route possible in order to get adjacent to its target. If no target is specified, then the default target is you. And yeah, I'm going to mark A1, A2, A3 as they finish their movement. And some enemies are faster than you. That's what this X1 means. So he'll move next to me and attack for 3 the first round before I can do anything. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I was thinking of the slippery rat. Apparently this one is slow, is not very fast. So an orange will take its turn after you. This is shown by the X1 symbol located to the right of the enemy card. Okay. So he'll try to attack me if I'm still within 1 movement, and he'll move towards me either way. And I mark this if he's immobilized. You'll see that from my actions in a second. So he's going to keep on trying to move next to me and attack. Okay. Oh, they messed up. Okay, so I'm trying to defeat the overgrown rat. When it said take care of, I don't know why I thought that I was like going to make it my pet, but apparently it means defeat. I have to kill it. Yeah, and the slippery rat is one I'd looked at before. They move extra quick. Oh, and I see where they show it. Look, you see how my thing is to the right of them? So they go, then I go. And here, my X is to the left of them. So I go, and then they go. Okay. All right, so what are my actions this time? I got to get to 8 damage total. All right, looks like all of my attacks except this one are going to be melee. This one seems really good. Look, attack 1 and wound. For any following attacks, you gain 1 against the wounded target. So that'll definitely make me kill him a lot more quickly, although that would let him come and attack me. And with his 3 attack, if he hits me twice, I'm done. Now, if I immobilize him, I stop him from moving on his next turn, which would make it easy for me to hurt him. And actually, if I let him move next to me, or if I move next to him, then I could resolve my move before the attack, because he only moves 1. So yeah, let's see. All my movement is in this column, so I'm going to be able to move every round. And then I can defend 2 to cancel 2 of his damage, so he'd have to hit me all 3 times to defeat me. But I think I'm just gonna tank a hit the first time. So I'm gonna do move 2, attack 1 with the move, and then attack 3. It should just beat the crud out of him. So yeah, let's go ahead and I move first. I go there with my move 2. Then I'll resolve, or you can like cross them out as you do them. Then I'll resolve my 1 attack, and then for following attacks I get +1. And then I do 3 more, which is going to be 4. So yeah, he'll be dead in a second. Okay, and then he stays where he is. So I guess that's right, A1 as well. And he hits me for 3. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, and then we go into round 2. So if I do attack 2 and attack 1, it says for any following attacks, you gain +1 against the wounded target. Does that mean for like the rest of the battle? I think it probably would, but you know what? Just in case, we can do, I can immobilize him. Oh, sorry, that's round 2. And then move to an attack, and then attack 2. I mean, yeah, he's super dead, because I'm going to hit him for 2 damage, even if I don't get the bonus, and then another 1 damage for my 2 attack actions. The immobilize didn't matter. I believe these are the same actions I'm going to use for a while, so the fact that they weren't too important in this first battle, because it was so basic, doesn't really mean very much. All right, if you achieve the goal, mark the flexing muscle on page 30. All right, we'll see what that does. And if you finish the rounds without having achieved the goal, or you're defeated, turn the page over and read what is written below. Oh, no, okay, I'm just turning to page 20 because I did succeed. Now let's do a little bit more narrative, and then, again, I think I might stop because I've showed you kind of like the basics of how things work, and I'll do the rest off camera and come back to let you know what I thought of the game. The darkness of the night was broken by the brightness of the moon and the stars. They beamed down, illuminating some seagull tearing flesh from a hairy mass on the rocks. I picked up my things and headed toward the port tavern that overlooked the whole cove from atop its privileged position in the port. It was a wooden structure of several levels made from salvage pieces of ships which had been smashed and broken against the rocks. I liked going there. It smelled of beer, salt, and spiced fish. An odd glowing had been emitting from the mountains since the incident. The light was slowly changing colors, taking on a psychedelic aspect, probably due to the gases from ongoing fires. The most influential citizens of the city were gathered together to organize the expedition. The only one missing was Thorvald, the wily sheriff who reigned over his fleet of fishing boats. He said he was busy with a special trip to the continent. I learned the expedition was to be led by an eccentric explorer known as Crazy Graybash, whose grandfather had told him tales about his own youth spent in the mountains. The town chronicler was to accompany Graybash along with a dozen guards, a trapper, and 8 porters. The final member of the group was a bizarre huntress who happened to be on the island at that moment and whose aim was legendary. That night I did not find restful sleep, being instead overcome by the grotesque images that inhabited my nightmares. Interesting, I get to choose a dream. If you dreamed of a wooden statue with feminine curves that was being burned, mark that. If you dreamed of a bearded old man screaming under the water, well, I guess the statue one makes more sense with what happened previously in the game. I spent the next day cleaning and filleting fish at the market with my old fish knife, but my thoughts were elsewhere. They drifted to the other side of the swamp, to the mines and beyond the mountains, where nobody had dared to go for decades. In the heart of the island, there were wild animals and half-naked humanoids. They said these beasts could resist the cold thanks to dark pagan powers. There were also rumors of intelligent creatures halfway between legend and fact that were as big as a house and more deadly than the reef sharks. The expedition had left that morning intent on making camp somewhere beyond the swamp by night. I felt the call of the unknown more powerfully than I ever had before. Unfortunately, 2 days later, I would have to ship out for the high seas, so I had no chance to join the group as a porter. Besides, everyone knew my physical and mental limitations. Every time I pushed my body to its limits, the chronic pain in my bones would increase exponentially. Okay, and here we have a semi-random picture. I guess that's me. And I'm going to page 15. Now back to the one I skipped. Had it not been for the encounter I'm about to describe, my life would have continued to be dull and boring, at least until I was drawn back to the top of that cliff again. The next evening, a visibly shaken sailor came up to me. It was Seraph, another captain from Thorvald's fleet. Unlike Khan, my current commander, Seraph was someone you could trust. He was the one who first pulled me off the streets, and I was under his command for several years.
Vestar, I want you to listen very carefully to me,
he said as he pulled me aside. You have to do something for all of us. The expedition that left for the mountains is making a huge mistake. You can count on me, Seraph, I responded solemnly. What do you need me to do? I cannot give you details, but you have to bring a very important object to the expedition party. The problem is that the object is located in Thorvald's office, and as you might have guessed, it is not easy to get in there, Seraph explained. It's an ebony cylinder that he keeps in a box in his desk. Does Thorvald know about this? I asked, to be sure I understood what I was getting into. Seraph shook his head slowly and looked around nervously. He took a breath and lowered his voice to a faint whisper.
Things are more complicated than you might think, Vestar.
He licked his lips and went on.
You can trust me. When you deliver the ebony cylinder to the Huntress, everything will become clear.
His words worried me, but I accepted. He placed his hand on my shoulder like a proud father would do with his son. I knew he believed in me. It was already well into night when I ran down the pier towards land. Thorvald lived in the Moon Lighthouse, a construction with a tower crowned by a crystal stone that reflected and amplified the light of the heavenly bodies to help ships reach the port safely. Okay, do I want to enter by climbing to the roof or go through the sewers? I don't think my body would do too well with the roof, so I'm reading below the divider. I opted to find a way into the building through the sewers below. As a homeless boy, I had escaped the biting cold of winter in that stinking underground labyrinth of mud and filth. I was worried because I knew that after dark, the damp corridors were invaded by aggressive amphibians, and rightly so. Their scent alerted me to their presence, but too late. Entering a dark, muggy room, I came face to face with a pair of odd amphibian creatures known as newtics, smashing clams against the sharp rocks in an attempt to open them. All right, I'm not going to play this one out. I'm going to stop, but yeah, here we go. I would fight these two newtics. They each have their own behavior. I go before them. I can immobilize them again. I can wound them again. You saw that. They can also wound me now, which definitely means that I did have the right idea first, and that it's an ongoing status effect that will apply for the rest of the time. And yeah, that's how the game would go from there beyond, but we'll stop for now. Don't want to spoil any more. And someday soon, I will record the review, and you'll get to just jump ahead magically in time. So, yep, here we go. Let's find out what I thought about In the Ashes. Alrighty, well, I am back, having just beaten the thing and kind of seen what there was to offer. So I'm going to give some review thoughts without really getting into much detail or specifics or spoilers. So the first thing to know is that the story is pretty linear. So I had mentioned kind of like branching things, and there are combats you can have where things branch, but mostly you're doing the exact same story as you go through. The key thing I will say without spoiling too much is that there are different characters, and at the end of each act, there are 4 acts in the game. At the end of each act, you will have some results that happen that kind of determine the fate of your character, and that will change the 4th act in a fairly major way and also change the ending in a fairly major way. So it's not like a lot of branching besides slightly different combats and things, but your ending and kind of who's around for it does change quite a bit. But yeah, mostly you're just reading the same story. The story itself was pretty cool. It's actually a smaller scale than I kind of thought it was. At least in the parts I read, there were still some open questions that I'm not 100% sure about, but I still liked it. I thought the writing was good, that kind of how things went were interesting, and the characters you play are pretty cool. Actually, the one that you saw in the playthrough is probably the least interesting in my opinion, but he was fine. The combat also gets pretty dang cool. First of all, I should notice I kind of wish I had recorded one more combat because it changes greatly. A big thing is that starting literally in the combat that I didn't show you, you are flipping to random pages or rolling a die to give yourself bonuses or negatives to your attacks, and same thing for the enemies. So it becomes less like if you saw the video and thought that it might be a pure puzzle. It becomes less a pure puzzle and has a bit more like tactics and kind of trying to make things happen. I did find a lot of the combats were on the easy side. Now, there are difficulty modifiers that I used a bit of, but then there were some combats that were crazy tough. So like the balance is a little bit iffy sometimes. But the big thing is that besides the story being very linear, it's super fail forward. Now, again, at the ends of acts, there are like major things that'll happen and change. But generally speaking, you are going to get through the story. Things will happen differently. You won't unlock as many cool tools and stuff if you lose a lot, but you will get to play through the entire book. Like the game, at least in my plays, even when I lost combats, never just stops you dead and lets you like not continue on. Another thing I want to mention is that the leveling up and the variety in characters is really cool. So each character will, during their act, get first a basic class, 1 of 2, and then will get an epic class beyond that one. So you basically have up to 4 leveling up paths between characters. And then each of the other characters has very different ways of, first of all, resolving combat, super different types of abilities. They get like really cool and are kind of like thematically interesting. So playing Act 1 combats feel a lot different than playing Act 2 combats, feels a lot different than playing Act 3 combats. So yeah, again, like not going into too much detail, but I just thought that was really neat. So yeah, overall, I thought this was a good time. It is a little, the whole thing about like drawing in the book and such is a little awkward. You are really getting at most 2 plays of the game. And since the story is pretty linear, unless you like really want to try to fight for another ending or just really want to try out the combat to see different combinations of powers, I think that, probably 1 play is going to be the most that people really, on average, will want to do with this. But I guess you could pass it to somebody else and have them play through the other path, although they'll have to know kind of like the little rules that are needed to make sure that you don't go to the wrong direction because it's your second playthrough. But yeah, In the Ashes, as a big fan of Choose Your Own Adventure books, the Choose Your Own Adventure part, again, of this is very, very minimal. This is pretty much a linear story, but the narrative portion is good. The combat is cool. And again, without spoilers, the different characters and how they control is quite different, more than I realized the game would have initially. So yeah, I enjoyed my time with this one. Go check it out. I think it's out at this point. And thanks for watching, everybody. A special thank you to our biggest Patreon supporters, J. William F., Pedro Lucas, Steve Wren, Miles, Wayne Scott, and Nick Skeen. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you at the next stop.